So for this third segment, let's talk now about how to use job analysis results to do something useful. So when I talked about job analysis reasons, one of the things I discussed was performance appraisal. What we're going to do for our team project is develop a list of important indicators from a job analysis. So let's take some time to go through this now with an example. And I would like you to actually do these steps, not just watch what I do. So for the selection project, your instructions are first to determine what job you're going to hire for, write a detailed description of the job, and write up the required knowledge, skills, and abilities and other characteristics needed to do that job. Then these third and fourth pieces are what we're going to focus on today. A description of how you would know if someone is performing well. So these are your performance indicators. And then create a performance evaluation form that your team will develop. So your performance evaluation form will use the answers that you gave on question 3. So let's start. We're going to start with the ONET. So by now, you should have the ONET probably showing up in your search history, right? So it'll be easy to get to. What I want you to do is look up the job of Social Science Research Assistant. So we're going to scroll down on the results and see what information is relevant to performance. I'd like you to copy down or download any tables for work activities, detailed work activities, job tasks, and this is just labeled as tasks at the top, and skills. And note you will need to click on the Details tab at the top of the page to get the Save Table XLS option. Okay. So I've copied down just the top portion of some of these tables. For tasks, let's take a closer look. The first thing says prepare, manipulate, and manage extensive databases. Provide assistance with the preparation of project-related reports, manuscripts, and presentations. Obtain informed consent of research subjects or their guardians, etc., etc. So there are a number of things here, and each of them has an importance rating on the left-hand side, and these are categorized as being core tasks. There are also supplemental tasks listed on the table. When you do this for your team project, I'd like you to look at both the core and the supplemental tasks. So here are work activities for the Social Science Research Assistant. And again, I only picked out the top items just to fit on this table for demonstration purposes. We have our detailed work activities and our skills. So, what do we do with all of this information? Remember, our goal is to list all the performance indicators, things that will tell us whether a person is doing a job well or not. So we could go about this by either listing out every item, everything that's provided here, or we could somehow summarize the information into smaller categories. So in general, the latter is the preference for most cases of performance evaluation. Just think, If you were doing ratings, would you want to rate your employees on a list of 114 things for each employee? That would get very tedious. So, for social science research assistant, we have a lot of information here that we need to narrow. So what is important for good performance? Are there things that we can cut out? Can we somehow categorize these? So we want to categorize similar tasks and activities together. We want to make sure you get all of the important content of performance. So this is that validity in terms of representing everything in the construct. So I want you to try your hand at summarizing this information before you come back to the presentation. So take some time and look at the lists and try to summarize them. Okay, so what did you do and what did you come up with? What was your strategy in summarizing the information? Or did you decide you were too overwhelmed with the task and you came back here right away? In either case, I'm going to go through some ways of looking at this information and summarizing it. There are multiple ways to do this. I'm going to walk you through two ways. You can use either one of these methods for your group project, or you can, if you find something else that works better for your group, go ahead and do that. You also can use other categories of information provided in the ONET results if you find that they're important or helpful. So when we look at the list and look at the items within the list that we have, the tasks, the work activities, detailed work activities, and the skills, we find that there are items that are very similar on multiple lists. For example, the first item on the job task list is to prepare, manipulate, and manage extensive databases. If we look at the work activity list, the second item says processing information. These are very similar. When you manage and create a database, you are processing information. And the first item on the detailed work activity list is develop technical or scientific databases, which is basically the same as the first task. So these don't match up directly to a skill, but there are aspects of several skills that are included, such as active listening. You need to listen to your supervisor to know how to set up a database, critical thinking, complex problem solving, and perhaps mathematics. Other things not listed on our list that I copied, but are further down on the ONET list, are things like programming, quality control analysis, and systems evaluation. So if we group all these together, we might give them the label, say, of developing and using databases. So let's go down the task list. The second item on the task list is provide assistance with the preparation of project-related reports, manuscripts, and presentations. So what can we find on the other lists that might match up to this? On the activity list, the fourth item says providing information to supervisors, coworkers, and subordinates by telephone, in written form, email, or in person. So you may be providing information for a report in an email, or you might even be writing part of that report for your supervisor. Or if you're in a group meeting and you're reporting on what you did for the project so that someone else can write it up. The seventh item says translating or explaining what information means and how it can be used. in the preparation of a report, you have to take information and explain where it came from and what it means, and perhaps what implications it might have. In the details activity list, the second item says prepare scientific or technical reports or presentations. So again, this matches up with the second item in the task list. And related skills for this category might be reading comprehension, writing, and critical thinking. And we might label this category writing reports. So we do this for each of the items in the list we're starting through, in this case, the task list. So we need to go through all the items. Some may fit back into a label or category that you already created, and that's great. You put it there. So at some point, you need to decide a cutoff point for what is important enough to include in your list and what is not. So some of these lists go through and look at or list items that have a 0 importance reading. For example, the skills list has items with a 0 importance reading. I think a 0 is pretty clearly something that you would not include on your performance indicators list. However, you need to decide where the cutoff really is. So a 3 or a 10 on this may also be something you don't include. But what about 25? And we need to think about this. What is this importance rating even telling us? So we need to go back to the form that was used to get this information. And I've put a link here for the work activities form. And what you'll find is that the survey used a 1 to 5 scale, but yet the importance ratings, it looks like it's on a 0 to 100 scale. So why are there zeros? See if you can find out the answer to this question. So when you end here, you will have a list of categories, and you should have items from all of those lists that we downloaded fit somehow into those categories. In this strategy to categorize everything, you're going across the tables to look at what is similar across them. In the next option, start with one list and just look within that list on items that can be categorized together. So skills may or may not work so well here, mostly because they're pretty distinct skills. However, I will note that you could put them into broader categories, such as just a general communications category. And you could put verbal communication and writing, etc. in there. So you probably want to start with either the activities list or the tasks list. Group together activities and tasks that are similar. So this is just within one of the tables. The end result may be the same as cutting across the tables, but it's a different way of going about it. So if we take the tasks table and keep in mind again that only the core tasks are listed here. So should we create a separate item for each task? Probably not, because there are some that are similar. How can we go about summarizing these? If we take a look at the first one, prepare, manipulate, and manage extensive databases, and look further down on the list, There are some other items that are very similar. The fifth item there, verify the accuracy and validity of data entered in databases, correcting any errors. So here, it's more about looking at the data that's been entered, but it's still using the database. It's still manipulating the items within it. Further down on the list, perform data entry and other clerical work as required. So in this case, you're entering data into the database. And then further down, code data in preparation for computer entry. So you may have a survey that's being entered, and there might be codes for each of the responses that you're entering into the computer, into the database. So all of these relate to using a database. Then go through and see if there are other things that might group together. Provide assistance with preparation of project-related reports, manuscripts, and presentations. Well, editing and submitting protocols and other required research documentation. These are also written documents. This is the same type of activity. And then go through and do that for all of these items. See what groups together. If there are single items that don't group with others, that's fine. You can create an independent group for that one item. Then you're going to need to go back to the other lists. Go through those lists, each item, and group it into see if it can fit into a group that you created already from that first list, in this case, the task list. And again, if needed, you can create new groups if items don't fit into one you've already created. So these were two different methods. You can either cut across the tables and group items together, or start within one table and group, then bringing in the information and items from other tables. One other alternative that I'll discuss quickly is to start with the skills. Can all the activities be easily categorized into a skill? And would you want to use this as your evaluation categories? You may want to, you may find it useful. If you did, you need to keep in mind that there's a difference between having a skill and showing a skill. And this would need to be considered in your evaluation form. So just because someone has a skill doesn't mean they use it on the job. I might be able to write a coherent paragraph, but I might be unwilling or simply not asked to do so. So I have some notes on subjective grouping. When you group like this, you're doing it subjectively. You're deciding, just based on your own opinion, what things group together, what things seem similar. And people might have different opinions. So it's helpful to have a group of people to get different opinions on what would be grouped together, and then come to a consensus on that. Additionally, there are statistical ways to verify the groups you've created. To do this, you give all items to supervisors to rate their employees. So in this case, all 114 items. You take the results from those evaluations and you correlate all the items to see which ones are highly related. There will be groups of items that are all related to each other. If a supervisor rates someone high on items like prepare, manipulate, and manage extensive databases, they're also very likely to rate them highly on processing information and developing technical and scientific databases. And the reverse is true. So if you have a supervisor rate someone low on prepare, manipulate, and manage extensive databases, they're also likely going to rate them low on processing information and developing technical and scientific databases. So we look at the correlations and see the groups where things correlate highly with each other. So these groups or factors are what we should use for a shorter summarized performance evaluation. This technique is what we call factor analysis and is a statistical technique that I didn't mention before, but is used very often in IO psychology, particularly to look at the quality of measures. So you are not going to have the opportunity to do a data collection like this for your project, but I want you to know this is the process. After you do subjective grouping, you would go through and do this data collection and look at the data, do the factor analysis, and use those as your categories for a performance evaluation. So for the selection project, now I've talked about how you come up with that list of performance indicators. Now I want to discuss the performance evaluation form developed by your team. So like I said, the form that you create for this fourth piece will be based on your answers from the third piece. So what we're going to do is first we need to create instructions for the rater, and you need to determine who the rater will be. It's often the supervisor, but it doesn't have to be. It could be coworkers, it could be clients. It's up to your group to decide. I want to make a note here too, that you do not have to use one of the choices I've listed here. I'm going to give you some examples, but they are simply for demonstrative purposes. I want you to look on the internet. Look at performance evaluation in the book. Try to find other sources. If you've had performance evaluations done, take a look at those. What does the form look like and what kinds of questions are asked? See what you all think is best and make sure to record why you choose what you did, as this will be part of your report, is the explanation. So after you create your instructions, you're going to take your categories and create a response scale to ask about each item. So what is the question that's going to be asked? Some examples might be, how well does the employee perform each of the following activities? Or what percentage of the time does the employee perform satisfactory performance or above in each of these activities? What will the response range be? Is it going to be a 1 to 5 scale, a 1 to 10 scale, 0 to 100? If you're looking at percentage of time, 0 to 100 makes sense. What are the anchors for the scale? What are the explanation for each rating that you would put on there? Would you put above average, average, below average? Always, sometimes, never? 100%, 50%, 0%? So you need to have anchors or a wording description that goes with each of the scale, response scale options. So I'm hoping that this activity turns out to be something interesting in the long run and that you'd have fun doing it, and that it will give you a different perspective the next time you receive a performance evaluation.